Hello, everybody. Nick, we don't talk about westerns very often, and especially newer westerns because it's kind of a genre in flux right now.
No, in the 50s, you got hit over the head with westerns, and
Mhm.
so it's on TV, on film, everything. It was actually if you wanted to, like, how we get over the head with superhero movies, that was westerns in the 50s. 20 years ago, I think the last 20 years, Taylor Sheridan has been doing small bits in TVs and films and wasn't getting the roles that he wanted, and actually was going to be forced to give up, and he was going to buy a ranch and just live out his days running a ranch.
Mhm.
And his wife suggested, well, why don't you just write something? And he wrote down a screenplay that got sold. It was Sicario.
Mhm.
And from there, he written another screenplay, To Hell and High Water.
Mhm.
And then this last one, not only did he write it, but he felt that he was the only one that could direct it. And it's a phenomenal movie, Wind River.
Wind River. Today we're going to break it down, starring, getting hit over the head with superheroes. We got two superheroes leading the film. So we're going to discuss Wind River, this oft underseen film from Taylor Sheridan, and break down kind of where it exists in the pantheon of the New Age Westerns today.
It's what he calls the trilogy of the New American Frontier. It's 3 movies.
Exactly. So we're going to break it down today. Kyle and Nick on Film. Join us. Welcome back to the show, everybody. I'm one of your hosts, Kyle Goethe from GoatFilmReviews.com.
And I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast, and today we're going to talk about Wind River, which Taylor Sheridan says it's inspired by true events, which is the true event is that he discovered a lot of Native American women were missing off reservations and not being reported. And the account is, there really is no number. Nobody is keeping track of this. So hundreds of thousands of Native American women go off reservation, never be seen or heard from again. And he used that inspiration to write the screenplay and direct this movie, Wind River.
Mm-hmm. I recall being somewhat excited for this film.
Yeah.
The trailers looked solid. I liked Sicario. I liked Hell or High Water.
I really liked Hell or High Water.
I didn't expect how much I was going to absolutely love Wind River. Yeah. The theater had 2 people, myself and one other person. And
That's the
it was like opening day in this movie.
I went to see it for a matinee.
Yeah, and I just remember at the end of it going, wow. This is almost a perfect film. I'll discuss a little bit later, like my one thing that kind of throws it off a little bit for me, but this is almost a perfect film, and I do think it's my favorite of this American Frontier trilogy.
It was the 4th for me on the St. Paul Filmcast. I put it as number 4th. I put it probably as number 2 now because I put Dunkirk, 3 Billboards, Thor Ragnarok in this one.
Oh, okay.
After second viewing, I would jack this one up.
See, I know this is somewhere in that top 10. I don't remember where, but I remember just being so... this was my Oscar snub of the year, was that it got nothing at all. It's like Zodiac, it's like Portrait of a Lady on Fire, you get nothing.
I know. Second viewing this is great ending.
Yes.
Editing.
Mm-hmm.
And a great ending. The editing point I like is when you have this intention of like when they're going to use the chainsaw to cut to her frozen body out. But it cuts perfectly to a silent movie, a silent moment of him making his own weapons.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
The editing of build up, and I think that's Taylor Sheridan's using of being experienced in television, how they use that and cut. He put that in the movie as well. I like the beginning of this because when I watched it for the second time, you notice that her costuming blends into the environment. She's wearing blue and white, and it's kind of you see the landscape blue and white. And then the introduction of Jeremy Renner's character, Corey, he's blended into the environment. You don't see him, it's camouflage. And those 2 characters are definitely part of the environment, and people that come in don't really reflect that.
Yeah, Elizabeth Olsen is a very vibrant vehicle, like not vibrant like too much, but like she's got more color where she definitely is like against the calmness, the paleness of the snow and the sky. For those of you that haven't seen the film, it's about Corey Lambert, played by Jeremy Renner, comes across a body. An indigenous woman that is just dead and frozen out in the snow, and
miles
they get
from
involved.
anywhere.
Yeah, really just out there.
As you watch it, like, well, what the heck?
And what's crazy is that they know that she has been out running in the middle of the night barefoot, and like what happened with that story. And it's about him teaming up with an FBI agent played by Elizabeth Olsen to kind of figure out exactly what happened and why. And the film is very about its characters.
Yes.
We know these 2 leads very well throughout the whole film, and getting to see their different views on the situation, on the culture,
Yep.
on the world is so well done where they're not fighting, they're learning from each other.
Kyle put out the great essence of characters. I would show like the great essence of costuming in this movie, because a lot of you, like, you know, when Jeremy Renner puts there like a red rope, why red? Well, we will find out, because he's part of the environment. And anytime you see a Native American, they are wearing red, which is kind of showing the desecration, just the brutality that the Native Americans have gone through, and they're sacrificing what's being taken from them. I think the whole movie is things that get taken from you.
Yeah, there's a line,
including
we
life.
won't get into spoiler territory, but there's definitely a line that Renner says at one point, what did you take? And things that have been taken. It comes up a lot about, like, you know, things that have been taken and stolen, which is, I mean, very obviously we know what we're talking about when we talk about, you know, things taken and stolen over Native Americans and Indigenous.
Yeah, and I also want to bring up that, you know, the very important costuming of the FBI agent Anne coming into the reservation, and she's not properly equipped to handle it. Not only is their equipped because she's not ready, but her boss sends her out there not to be ready, and they have to use the victim's clothes for her to be ready to be in the environment. So it's almost like a play, like it's a double great writing of, you know, the FBI doesn't really care about you. We're just going to send one inexperienced person out there to assault. We don't even care. And then her having wearing the victim's clothing, old clothing, as well as her parting of their environment.
Yeah, and she's not even really supposed to solve the case. She's supposed to get out there, take her notes, send in her report, and then they'll decide what to do later. But she only takes it on because no one else is going to.
God,
you know?
Yeah.
Jeremy Renner also is an interesting character in that I think if people understood the character before seeing the film, it's weird to have a film about a murder on an Indian reservation with a white guy leading the film. But I think it's interesting to see how he fits into the environment.
Yeah.
Him being, of course, the father of a, you know, young child who died out there, and of course that child is half Indigenous, half white, and kind of like, so he himself doesn't really belong, but he spent a lot of years working his way into the environment, working his way into the culture to be accepted. He still isn't.
Yeah. Also, he works for them too. He's hired to stop these lying. That's his whole job is being interrupted by this sequence of events. I'll also talk about doors. I mentioned this because we were going to watch it the second time, and then first time viewing, I noticed how the emphasis Taylor Sheridan put on doors in this movie. In fact, Jeremy Renner coming up to the door of his ex-wife, and they have their conversation, and he's allowed in. The first time that Anne meets with the police officer Grant, played by Graham Greene, and everything, there at their door, when she interrogates the victim's family, she's at the door, and we have a very important sequence door of her knocking on the trailer. So what I think Taylor Sheridan's writing about the doors is the emergence of a world going into somebody else's world.
Yeah, breaking the barrier.
Breaking barriers,
it's especially noticeable for me. Elizabeth Olsen's character shows up. She's outside. The snow is coming down, and she's not prepared for it. She goes, "Can we just finish this conversation inside?" Because it's almost like they need to know who she is before they won't let her in,
right?
And she's just like, "I'm freezing. I need to get in." And I think that's true. And only after you mentioned it, it's kind of you can't unsee it now. Watching the film again, I kept paying attention to the doors, and of course, there's some pretty big moments in the film that carry out with that closed door mentality.
I also emphasize visually, this is like a 3-step. I mentioned that 3-step. You had 3 in the beginning of the movie. You had the 3 hillsides, 3 layers, 3 characters. Pretty much a staple of 3s is presented throughout. You got the lion and the 3 cubs and stuff. So there's a definitely emphasis of 3 parts. You know, even Jeremy Renner coming to pick up his son, you have definitely characters. So Taylor's very aware of the writing trope of 3 at a time.
Definitely, yeah. And this being the 3rd film in his American Accent trilogy, he's got to let people know about that. Another thing that stood out for me in the film is the music by Nick Cave and Warren Ellis. That's where you feel the Western, the dark Western reality of this frontier. It's a haunting score. It knows when it needs to brood, and then there's also some of these repeating lines. I watched the film with closed captioning on because I was watching it a little late at night, didn't want the wife to wake up, and I wanted to make sure I captured what the characters were saying again. And I caught like some of these lines that came up that were being chanted, hummed throughout the music. Yeah, about just like where you're wandering and where you're going and these kinds of things. I thought that was a very well done score overall. It just captures this uneasiness about it.
I like to emphasize the duality of Jeremy Renner's character and the victim, because in the beginning of the movie you see her running through the snow, leaving her tracks. But then Jeremy Renner shoots the wolf, and then he intentionally drags that wolf. So it's like a parallel of them characters making their mark in the snow. Where the heck is take two? Because they filmed this in the snow. It looks like they didn't interrupt the snow at all.
I know that there was a real blizzard occurring while filming, so maybe they just went back and took a second take after the blizzard was done. Yeah. You know, they were like just repeat filmed. I'm not 100% certain because it would be incredibly difficult to shoot that.
Where's take two? Is this? It has to be the first take. A lot of it.
I'm sure quite a lot of it out in the snow. They probably went into it knowing we can't do this again. Yeah. You know, we may not be able to.
You and I both worked on film sets. So you know it's a slop because you have like hundreds of people around, and I'm sure they're like, "Don't go out there. Yeah, we're gonna film this." Yeah,
it reminds me of when people do explosives on set, or like Apocalypse Now. They talk about that the end part where at the beginning of the film where they had to line up all these explosions. They're like, "We can't do this a second time." Which is incredibly stressful. But maybe that's why, too, we don't see a ton of camera angles specifically on people's feet unless it serves the story.
Yeah.
So maybe a lot of the time they tried to lift it up so that way you're not
But noticing. It's very clever. I mean, David Lean did it with Lawrence of Arabia. Where's take two when the camels are going through the desert?
Yeah. Somebody out there with a snow cone.
Raking the snow and looking pristine. The other thing I was going to point out is the introduction of Dan Crawford Gill, one of the best introductions of a metaphor playing of the white people and Native Americans. How he always says, "Why do you, even when you try to help us, you're still insulting us."
Yeah,
which is a good punch to the face. And her definitely why aren't you paying attention to what your daughter was? She's an adult. What great dialogue was played on that. Few signs you get the attention, but they know they have to work together.
Yeah, she's an adult barely. Like that's that's how Elizabeth Olsen hits it. That's true actually, and it highlights the uneasy tension of where these two cultures are at and how they view each other. And especially her being not just an outsider, being white, being an outsider, being like from a completely different state, never working in the snowy areas, never having to deal with these kinds of situations, and not understanding when she's overstepped her bounds.
Yeah, because she's at the door, and then you have this very stiff dialogue exchange. But then when Jeremy Renner character comes in, he immediately embraces him at the door and hugs him.
Yeah, because again, Renner has worked very hard. His character has worked very, very hard to break that barrier, to pass through it. Even though he's not entirely successful, there are still people that call him an outsider, and he knows that.
I want to emphasize is actually Taylor Sheridan used Jeremy Renner and what's her name? Elizabeth Olsen. Worked with him for 6 months on the reservations to train, to learn. And Jeremy Renner actually showed off his skills at snowmobiling. He could do it standing up, and you really that's a good signature, especially on people who have driven snowmobiles. You become really skilled at and really comfortable driving one foot.
Yes. And as a person who has not been on a snowmobile in a great many years, I was good at it. But I do, I know what you mean, where it's you have to ingratiate yourself in that. It's almost another cultural thing. Yeah. People who've never been on a snowmobile.
And you hike with your gun. You don't hike with it. You hike with your gun unarmed and using your legs power drive. It's everything is presented well thought out of. You believe this character is very convincing as trained.
Yeah, he was one of the most incredible turns. I don't think Jeremy Renner's a bad actor. I just think I've never seen him to this caliber.
Yeah.
Really rising above, and maybe it's because he's been so well known for his work with the MCU, and he's never really been like the guy in the front.
Yeah.
And he's also had things like the Mission Impossible movies where he was going to take over for Tom Cruise and then didn't, because Cruise found he liked the franchise. And then the Jason Bournes, he was going to take over for Matt Damon, and then his film, while being pretty liked by critics, didn't make enough money, so they bring Matt Damon back. Like, he's kind of been screwed out of a lot of these like front and center films. And so seeing him here really just more or less surprised me because of how good he is.
I just want to emphasize it because a lot of people would just think that this is just another filler movie to take away from his contracts with Avengers, as well as Olsen's character with Avengers. That this is just a movie that just fill in time, as with our contract obligations. No, they firmly committed to this movie and a long duration time committed to making this movie. It's just not something of partly.
It's not a comfortable movie to make. No. I mean, just the subject matter, being out in the cold and actually being out in the cold. And having a break from your green screen lifestyle of superhero movies.
I want to talk about the greatest cut of film since 2001, which is the knock on the door cutting into a jump in time.
Yeah, the flashback, yes.
The flashback, which is a perfect, awesome setup, which is shocking to us because it's I'm still convinced, even when you watch it a third time, you're like, oh, that's the knock on the door.
Yeah.
And then you get a whole jump sequence that interrupts the flow.
Yeah, this was a moment now. I think this was my fourth viewing. This is the first time when I expected what was going to happen.
Right.
And that's kind of too. I think the film has a great climax, great denouement. Everything comes together really nicely. For me, the one small tweak that I have that keeps it from being absolutely perfect is it does feel like the ending just shows up. Like you kind of go into most films when you're getting to the ending, you're getting there. And this film surprises with a climax that you almost don't feel you're ready for yet. It catches you off guard. And in a lot of ways it's successful, but it also too, it kind of just happens out of nowhere and you're like, oh my God, this is where we're going now.
Right. And you talk about the ending with Jeremy Renner in white, part of the environment.
Oh, I mean, just everything with the last big action set piece itself,
right?
Without breaking too much into where the story goes. I think you need to experience it.
Yeah.
That whole thing, just like you finally realize, like, oh, this is the ending, and it almost feels like a 2-act structure because you have the whole first half of the film dealing with this, and then the last half you're like, oh, we're here.
Yeah, this film definitely there's a slow, meticulous sequence of characters, and then it turns into the third act is. Boom, 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 boom,
yes,
hardcore.
And it reminded me too that how incredible that there's an early second act, if there is a second act, there's an early second act action set piece in a house that just comes out of nowhere, and it happens like that's what the action really kills in this movie is that Taylor Sheridan doesn't give you time to prep.
No, and it almost like that the house sequence of the confrontation of the battle almost seems like a trial, like FBI agents would go through like shooting galleries in practice. It almost seems like that.
Yeah, it's shot that way. Yeah,
kind of shot like that way. It's almost like their trials and their simulations of how it happens to, and it's almost like she can handle herself. Kind of like it's a testament. It's a barometer.
It's another confrontation at the door.
Yeah, a confrontation at the door.
Absolutely.
If we could possibly, I would like to talk about the end, which is one of the best endings. In the last
we talked about the last shot or the last like sequence.
The last shot.
Okay.
The ending. If you haven't seen the movie, you don't want to talk about it. I definitely want to talk about this ending. It's been around for.
We're gonna give you a spoiler alert real quick, just in case.
The ending of him Dan Crawford, Crowfeet, I think. Dan Crowfeet, looking at the world going by with his death mask on that he doesn't even know how to do because things have been taken away from him. And watching people's lives go on almost like they don't care as they watching the highway, the traffic, like life is going on and things are being taken away from them, but they're almost like a nobodies.
And the people in the vehicles and everyone out there doesn't know what's happened here.
Exactly.
They don't know the pain that he's going through. They'll never know.
And then it's funny, and I think it's here, and then Jeremy Renner shows up and sits with him, and they have a quiet moment of cowboys and Native Americans can get along. When it's you've been a kid in the 50s and 60s, you always played cowboys and Indians. You battle. Here they sit and they are grieving together.
Yes.
As well as I think it's intentional that Taylor Sheridan put a child's playground in front of them as they go past it to show we're done playing this juvenile cowboy Indian game. We're now maturing and we're going to go forward.
Well, it represents their shared loss.
Yeah.
And I think it harkens back, you mentioned, the cowboys and Native Americans kind of always being on opposite sides in Westerns. Yeah. There's a great scene when Renner's character is teaching his son to ride a horse. And he goes, wow, it's full cowboys. And Dad, he goes, no, that's Arapaho. And
Yes,
he rejects the cowboyness of who he is, because he doesn't see himself as the opposite side of the spectrum. He sees himself as part of it.
Yeah.
Really fantastic film. And every time I watch it, I find new things that I really like about it, and new ways. Like, the film is shocking. It's there's some horrific stuff, there's some disturbing stuff, but I think comparative to like a film that's also disturbing and shocking like The Pledge, the ending of this film nails it. It's why this film for me is so much higher up on that list, because I love The Pledge until the ending. This is one that I love more because of the ending.
I agree. Right. Definitely. One of the best endings since Whiplash.
Yeah, so there you have it, guys. We apparently both love this movie. It's on our top 10s, and it keeps on rising from the year that it came out in 2017.
Second viewing, this should have been nominated for Best Editing.
Yep, Best Editing, and Best Lead, Best Picture. You should have been up for everything.
It's phenomenal.
So there you have it, guys. Our thoughts on Wind River. Have you seen it? If not, we urge you to check it out now. And if you have, leave your thoughts below as well. We want to
Apparently, cabin members didn't watch it.
No, they didn't. They did not. Shame on you.
Yeah.
But yeah, let us know in your comment section below what you thought about the film. Drop us a like too if you enjoyed this content. We love hearing back from you guys about it. Yeah. And hey, if you want to see more of our content every time we drop an episode, click that subscribe button. It's one of my favorite parts, is waking up to an episode on my suggested videos list. Even I'll watch it again. I don't care.
Yeah, we love talking movies. We'll talk any movie.
Yeah. So, and if you want to be involved in our movie selection, check out the Patreon.
Yeah.
Patreon.com/KyleNickOnFilm. For as low as $1 a month, you can help support the show. You get some of our special new episodes of Movie Picks with Kyle and Nick, where we break down some of our favorite stuff. And you can be involved in it too. We like talking all sorts of movies. Sometimes it's just easier to have you tell us which one to watch. So there you have it, guys. That's all for us. You can check me out on goatfilmreviews.com.
And you can find my podcast, the St. Paul Filmcast, on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Amazon Radio, where I interview local filmmakers from the Twin Cities area.
Thank you so much for joining us, guys.